Welcome once again to Button Mash on WCRD 91.3 FM, the pulse of Ball State. We've got a great show for you today. We're interviewing Luke Martin, an indie dev, and his game, talking about his game Reactor 3, but that'll come later. Right now, we're going to talk some news, but let's introduce our special guest. Hey, Luke Martin, you're actually joining us for the news.
Yes, I'm here.
we're all barely here. Yeah. And we have another guest, a good friend of ours who's going to be working with us on expanding Button Mash operations, Nick Dowell.
Yes, that was my last name.
Speaking to the mic, Nick.
Yeah, sorry. It's kind of cramped over here. Anyway.
How you doing, Nick?
I'm doing pretty well. It's cold, but it's warmer, which is nice. I want to wear like 10 layers instead of like 15.
Yeah, we're not in tundra zone anymore.
It wasn't
my street is still ice.
It wasn't negative today, which... That was great news.
All right,
but nobody likes the weather.
Nobody likes it. This is not a weather show. This is a gaming news show.
Real quick though, Luke, is it just me, or was there Reactor 1 and 2 before 3?
No,
or is this
there
just,
were no Reactor 1
You just picked a number.
I had to pick a number. It's actually historically accurate, but...
Oh, okay.
All right, let's move on into the news for today. Biggest news story out of Japan. Nintendo had their yearly financial conference featuring a rather disappointing earnings report. And what is Iwata's first name? Good Lord, help me. President Iwata of Nintendo has chopped his salary in half following
I feel like Iwata isn't how you pronounce it. But let's
Iwata.
stick with it.
I think it's Iwata.
Yeah, I think it is.
I take Japanese right now. I
that
better,
is
I better
right.
get
You
it
do take
right.
Japanese. You know what?
We'll trust you then.
Touche.
Okay. So yes, he chopped his salary in half after a very disappointing earnings quarter. And they announced a couple of different projects that they're hoping will again revitalize the brand after a abysmal earnings on the Wii U.
Yeah, what were the numbers? Do you have those?
I think they lost 30 million.
Oh man.
Oh.
Yeah.
Then again, it is Nintendo, so they got a lot of money in the bank, but still.
They have almost twice as long as other major competitors to get caught up.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, they've been in the game a lot longer than Sony and Nintendo.
So starting off with the bad news first, because everybody loves bad news. Iwata made a point to admit that the Wii U will not drive profit for the coming year, and Nintendo will have to rely on handheld sales for that. Obviously, Nintendo's cornered the handheld market. PS Vita is no big contender at the moment, but it's just yet another confirmation that the Wii U has failed completely. Not completely, but it's failing pretty dang hard.
Yeah.
It's a huge bummer too, because like I have a Wii U and I absolutely love using it. Like it's crazy fun, and you have some awesome games like Super Mario 3D World, which is basically Super Mario Cat World, but they don't tell you that on the title. No, you literally start it up and it makes cat noises. It's crazy hilarious. But like, you know, you have the Wind Waker HD collection, and that's one of the biggest Zelda games ever. It has a crazy awesome lineup, and it's really disappointing that it's not getting the attention it really deserves.
Iwata also made a point of mentioning that they're not trying to make excuses for the failings of the Wii U, but he said that there was a big technological leap between the Wii and Wii U that they were not prepared for, and considering the PlayStation 4 and Xbox Ones are at least home console juggernauts, PC obviously still is the master race at this point, but considering that's their competition, they really should have been ready for it. No Wii U price cut either, which seems like a bad step. And after it, just complete trivia here, the stock market didn't really seem to be reacting well to the financial event. After all, their stock dropped down over 4%.
Whoa!
So that might sound like a single-digit low number, but in the world of business, that is some big change.
In the world of monies and cents, it makes some sense.
Turn your mic. You're not turning.
Puns. Sorry.
The puns are punny.
But
funny.
Let's talk about the good news, because there is some out of it. Mario Kart 8 is being released in May. Mm-hmm. Hooray! We have another Mario Kart.
The world needs more.
The cycle begins again. It really does seem that Nintendo is once again focusing on, well, we have our franchises. Let's not bork that. Future games will be more of a priority on the gamepad. They're trying to implement more focus on that, encouraging developers to put more features into that, because obviously it's been kind of like the Wii controller in itself. It's a unique technology, and it's certainly charming, but if you don't develop the game specifically for it, it becomes an obtrusion. Luke, what do you think as in terms of an actual developer of a game?
Yeah, I can definitely see that the Wii, starting out with the Wii, it just completely changed, it sort of brought a gimmick into the situation. It wasn't like the Kinect where it was optional. It was the Wii, you had to have this new motion control. And so it really did force developers to develop games that utilize that sort of functionality even if they didn't exactly benefit from it.
Yeah, that was completely different from anything else on the market.
Exactly.
Which I think is what really sold it so well.
Yeah, it did.
It had a lot of celebrity endorsements.
It sold it enough to where, PlayStation had to come out with the Move and all the other, weird...
Connect.
Yeah, all the weird sort of gimmicky stuff that wasn't as well executed.
And it is proof that, graphics weren't everything. The Wii U dominated on, 480p or 480i graphics.
Gross.
Yeah.
All I can say is
it's like warm, chewy milk or something like that at that point. Yeah.
does not sound good.
But
I think if they really want to get ahead or really get back into the race, Nintendo would do some virtual reality stuff.
Well, it's
if
interesting.
They're all crazy about all their hardware and that's separating them from the others, along with their line of first party, whether it's Zelda, Mario, Donkey Kong. They're household name brands.
Well, interesting that
you
should mention their hardware and everything like that, because Nintendo also announced that they're going to be developing a new console for a release date in 2016. They've kind of given a very simple code name. I think it was HQL, health quality something. And
yeah, they said something about impacting your
wellness and your vitality.
Yeah.
And it's they're going to use less peripherals than they've been using. It's going to be focusing more on reading you without
second screen, mobile stuff,
yeah.
like using your app on your iPhone or whatnot. Because I remember they were talking about making apps for the iPhone and everything. I don't know who said, some Nintendo rep, but yeah, I guess that would make sense because they do really Nintendo likes to appeal to the casual crowd, the soccer moms.
I'm just waiting for someone to accidentally use their Wii pad as a fitness board, and crack it.
Yeah.
Stand on it. What's my weight?
Too much.
So let's see. It looks like they're still being vague about their plans with mobile. They did come out and say that they're not afraid to go into the mobile market, but they haven't made any official.
Of course they are. They're going to be confident as they can be.
Yeah.
Because they want to impress their shareholders and whatnot. They're like, we totally got this, guys. Don't worry. Well, when did you make phone stuff? I don't know. Does anybody know? Has Nintendo ever made phone related things?
I don't believe so.
All?
Never.
Yeah, I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
All right, so it looks like that's all for Nintendo news. Moving on, let's see. We have the PS Vita has come out with a slim version, dated in price for the UK. No word on North America yet. Previously, this slim model was only available in Japan. The Vita 2000 is what it was called, often dubbed the PS Vita Slim. February 7th for £180 is what it's going to go for in the UK.
180 pounds is not very slim. That sounds very heavy to me. Oh, more puns.
Oh, that wasn't a pun. That was just a good joke.
Oh, what would you call it? Okay, good joke. Okay.
So the changes from the original Vita model are pretty much just cosmetic. It's not gonna play any differently. It's just gonna look, maybe feel a little better. The PCH 2000 is lighter, thinner, has edges that are more curved, and an LCD screen replaces the OLED.
I'm going to say more curved.
More
curves, the better.
The battery life is good. Good news. The battery life is said to offer another hour to last to 6 hours. So I think, what was the PS Vita running at? I think people had been complaining that was maybe 4 or 5 hours on a full charge.
What does that compare to the DS?
The DS I can go for days at a time. Okay. Usually, if I have a full charge, I'm not
3D
playing it for 8 hours straight that day. If I'm coming back and forth between it,
yeah,
I've had good results.
Yeah, I've gone days and I just wake up. I'm like, oh, my DS is about to die. Okay, and then it charges in 20 minutes.
It's like Nega Christmas, it happens, but once a year. So that's pretty much all we have to talk about PS Vita Slim. Lucas, did you say you have a news story? I have one more after you, by the way.
I just want to point out that they released, I don't know if it was today or within the last couple of days. I didn't notice it till today. The February games for PlayStation Plus have been announced. I don't recall what the Vita titles are, but PlayStation 4 is getting a game. It's getting Outlast, which is awesome because I've heard great things about it. Very scary, apparently. Oh, and apparently it runs at, I think, 60 frames a second. They said it was really high frames per second on the PS4, which is great to hear. And then PS3 is getting Remember Me, Payday 2, and what is the last one? Someone
Metro Last Light?
Metro Last Light.
Yes, Metro Last Light,
Yeah, great
which are
game.
all games that have come out within
Very
the last
recently,
year.
yeah.
Very-
I
within the
believe.
last year,
I know. Remember Me and Payday 2 have been within the last
Metro
year.
Last Light was in the last year.
Yeah,
so
it was very recent, 4 or 5
Yeah.
months.
Which is crazy to think about, especially compared to Xbox Lives, because they've got the same thing. The golds for Xbox Live Gold, you get 2 free games a month. But theirs have, quite honestly, they've been older and just not as popular as games. I mean, PlayStation Plus gets you BioShock Infinite and Borderlands 2.
I really hope that PlayStation Plus kind of becomes an industry norm. Just this sense of, yes, we're making you pay another $15 for like our online service, but
it's worth
paying for
Yeah.
itself with free titles that, like, if I don't end up buying Metro Last Light, I haven't touched Metro Last Light. I just never had a reason to get into it or the means to. But now that, if I get PlayStation Plus for my PlayStation 4 or 3 or whatever, the fact that I get all this added content instead of, just, hey, pay $60 a year or else you don't get to use online is certainly much more appreciable.
Yeah. I mean, because like the Xbox Live Gold games, they released like Gears of War, the first one, and Halo 3,
How's
which are
that
two.
working?
Those games
Yeah.
came out 5-6 years
These
ago.
were ancient.
It's very old. The first Rainbow Six Vegas, that one too.
Oh
came
my
out a
God.
while
Oh, that's been out forever.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
Dead Rising 2, that's fairly recent. That came out in 2010.
You don't play Dead Rising for the graphics. You just play
Yeah,
for the simple bonkersness.
Yeah,
So anything else on that, Lucas?
not really. No.
So going back a little bit to PlayStation news, they have announced that they're working on sort of a solution to the PlayStation 4 being able to play PlayStation 1 and 2 games. Obviously, they've announced PlayStation Now, allowing
Which
you
is
to
the streaming
yeah,
service.
allowing you to stream backwards compatible content. No word on whether or not it's going to be like everything or a very select group of titles. But as for PS1 and PS2 titles, they're going to be working on emulators for the consoles to be able to play for PS4 as far as we know at this time. And I'm kind of weirded out because I've never actually used an emulator. Have any of
I mean,
you?
I've used my phone emulator, like for
Yeah.
Game Boy Advance games, play Pokemon on it.
I mean, I've used emulators for a couple games before in the past, and like they're nice, but like it's weird because you're used to that whole controller joystick feel, and then you're moved to a keyboard and it's different. So if they're putting it on the PS4, they're probably going to have controller based apparatuses, one of those two. They're going to have something for you
Octopi.
to use. Octopi, exactly. Something for you to use there, which will probably give you the feel you want. Because I feel like kind of now on the PS3, because you can get PS1 games and some PS2 games. Like I have Final Fantasies. Got 7 through 9 on there, and it feels like an emulator when you play because it's literally like the menu pops up and you have to like choose what disc you want to go into when you play and how you want to control the big you want the screen to be. So I feel like it's going to be kind of similar to what they already have now.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I doubt that they'll be making us use like our keyboards or like a touchpad, with like the fake joysticks or anything like that. But I was just initially concerned about the emulators. So moving on to what I believe is our last news story, because we're at about 14 minutes here. Have any of you heard? It's Christmas for me because there's a Sly Cooper movie coming out in 2016.
Yeah, I thought you'd be excited about that.
Woo! Except I saw the trailer today, and I was have all of you watched the trailer?
No, I saw.
Yeah.
I have, yes.
Okay, so for those of you who haven't watched the trailer or don't even know what Sly Cooper is, it's
Action adventure game where you play as a raccoon.
anthropomorphic raccoon steals things and is funny and
Did
is
you
awesome.
spell
Pomorphic.
anthropomorphic?
He's a human-esque raccoon. He's given human
Makes
qualities.
sense.
And my biggest concern with this trailer that came out, which is just showcasing the characters and wowing, is the fact that this actually exists. Sly Cooper does not sound like the actual Sly Cooper from the games.
Yeah.
I am. If this table were not bolted down to the floor, I would be flipping it because Bentley the turtle and Murray the hippo they sound exactly like their voice actor counterparts in the games. And we haven't seen Carmelita Fox or anything like. But granted, Carmelita Fox changed voice actors like every game.
Literally every single game Carmelita Fox has been in has had a different voice actor.
I gave up on her when they just went straight for the throat and had like that sexy like Latina or Latino temptress voice. I'm just like, I prefer the older one.
The big question, though, do you think it'll be good?
This is where my actual biggest concern lies because are are we familiar with the movies The Nut Job and Over the Hedge and all these
Nut
like
Job.
critter heist movies that are coming out? I am terrified for this because the average stupid consumer is going to see it and be like, I just saw this movie, didn't I? Oh, wait, it takes place at night. Well, that sounds boring. No, it's... but apparently it'll be the actual origin story of Sly Cooper with Clockwork, the evil mechanical villain who kills Sly's family. Spoiler alert. I mean, who cares? So that murder will obviously set this one apart from the Nut Job, which is something that I appreciate. What do you guys think?
I'm kind of excited for it because they've also announced a Ratchet and Clank movie.
Yes.
I live through Ratchet and Clank. I love that series. So when they announced this, I was pretty excited. My one concern, and you talked to me about this a little bit, is how the characters in the movie don't look anything like their game counterparts.
Yes.
Like, Bentley has eyes.
Bentley has eyes.
Which is
Murray
weird.
looks like bodybuilder or something like that.
Like, he
And-
has this huge beer gut going on.
Well, he's always been incredibly fat, but like his face is the weirdest thing because it looks like it's made of dry clay or something like that. And then Sly looks pretty accurate, but I'm like I thought about it because it'd been a while since I looked at a picture of Sly, and I was like, he doesn't have whiskers in the games. You monsters! He doesn't have whiskers in the game.
he went through like an all caps rage when he saw this. It was kind of funny to watch.
Yeah, I mean, and the voice actor just like didn't seem to have the same charm. I am so hopeful for this movie because I really just want it to work. And if this cracks video game movies into a more mainstream market, hallelujah. If it has to be Sly Cooper, and if I have to, destroy this franchise's credibility, so be it. But oh well, we'll see. And we'll update you next time on Button Mash about that. Lucas, tell them how they can find us, please.
You can find us all over the internet. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Blogspot, all of which we are at Button Mash BSU. We regularly post content to the YouTube site. Those are where we place our recordings of the show, and then on Twitter and Facebook, we will regularly post links to our Blogspot articles, of which we're trying to get content up every day starting next week, so you're going to see things showing up a lot more frequently. Is that all?
We are expanding,
We're done.
baby. Expansion.
Yes, we are.
All right, guys. Thank you, Luke Martin, for joining us. And if you tune in right after the break, you will hear a great interview with Luke Martin about his game Reactor 3 and his experience as an indie dev here at Ball State campus. Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Nick, for joining us. And guys, we'll see you in a few minutes here. Welcome back to Button Mash on WCRD 91.3 FM, the pulse of Ball State. With me today, I've got a very, very special guest, a local indie dev by the name of Luke Martin. Luke, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me on.
Yep, no problem, man. Luke is developing a game called Reactor 3 right now, a roguelike game, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Tell us a little bit about Reactor 3.
Reactor 3 is a combination of Fallout and Stalker, which not a lot of many people have heard about, but both games combined are typically considered to be the center of the post-apocalyptic sort of role-playing genre. And Reactor 3 specifically is a completely randomly generated game where all of the content besides the basic items and the core mechanics of the game are entirely randomly generated each time the game is run. So each time you play through the game, it's completely different. It's based on survival and squad tactics. You're put into a hostile place where there's a lot of crime and a lot of different factions moving around the world. It's like a abandoned city sort of situation, and the whole idea of the game is to raise your amount of respect you have in the world and to ultimately become the leader of the world.
So do you just want to control one character, or do you control like several, like a band or a group?
You start out by yourself, and then as you become more influential in the world, you are able to recruit people into your ranks and command them from there.
Okay, and so you said like the setting is kind of the post-apocalyptic
Chernobyl,
like Stalker.
essentially.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
exactly.
The quarantine zones of Chernobyl.
Yeah.
I had not really had too much exposure to roguelikes before starting the show and
I never heard the
learning
term.
the much more the indie portions of the indie portions of gaming. You know,
Exactly,
it's going
yeah.
very very deep into how weird can we get here. But I did like I looked up like the first roguelike games and how it's all like text based kind
Yeah.
of like this question mark stands for a dragon or something like that. So seeing a couple of the screenshots and the gifs of the game in motion was certainly really interesting, and like seeing all that text going a million miles a minute was like, whoa, okay, there's a lot of work put into this.
Exactly, yeah. Like, visually, I wanted to do something different than a roguelike, because a roguelike typically is very static. When you look at the screen, it stays still. I mean, there's nothing changing. You can look at it, and the whole idea is to be able to look at it and plan your moves out in advance because it's turn-based. But I wanted to take the concept of turn-based and real-time and put them together and have real-time segments and turn-based segments. And the whole idea was to make it stand out visually from all the other roguelikes out there.
And so, like, what kind of software do you use to program this? Like, how are you building this?
The game in its core is built in a programming language called Python using a graphics library called libtcod. Everything else is home rolled by me. Specifically, I use a Wing IDE to edit the code. And I mostly develop on Windows and Linux, but there's also a Mac version floating around out there somewhere of the game.
Okay. So with mentioning like you wanted to make a different style of roguelike game, how did you get started in indie development in the first place? There aren't too many of you guys here at Ball State, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, exactly. I could go all the way back. Third grade, I was sitting on my computer at home on that dial-up connection. I was looking up how to make games in JavaScript. And fast forward, so many years later, later on in high school, I really got into like application programming, and then from there, I got back into games, and I came to college, and I started getting more and more into the deeper parts of computer science, and from there, it just sort of took off.
Okay. That is really interesting to see the pathway that it took. And I like that you update your blog pretty frequently. It looks like at least maybe once every other week or so.
Yeah, usually, yeah.
I read one of your posts about like your frustrations. I think it was in fact your most recent one. With your frustrations behind developing this game. What are those, and how are they sort of unique to your situation as a lone indie developer?
Yeah, the problem with being a lone indie developer is that exactly that you are the only one involved. So it really comes down to being able to put a certain amount of self-control on yourself, because, I mean, if you're doing everything yourself, there's no one telling you no, and there's no one telling you that you can't do something. So anything and everything is possible, and that really came back to get me, later on in development, when I really wished I didn't spend 2 months working on this one thing when I could have spent another month, or two working on something more meaningful and more impactful to the game.
Yeah, I'd imagine it's a lot more freedom, but also a lot more responsibility.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, there's a lot of things that I learned along the way, because it was really a learning process. I started out with a certain subset of knowledge, and from there I really realized that I didn't know a whole lot. I thought I did, but as I went through, there were certain things that came back that weren't working 6 months into development that I went, well, I wonder why that isn't working. And I go back and look at it. And I mean, there's 100-something files of code that I'm messing with here. Some of them don't get opened up, for 6 months or so. And I come back and I look at it and I'm like, what state was I in when I wrote this? Like, it's not very good. And it's really just a learning process,
Yeah. So where do you see indie game development in about 5 years, maybe 10 years from now?
Yeah. What tools are you like? I don't know the names of these tools. I'm not an actual developer myself. I just follow the industry. What are you working with, and what are you actually excited to be getting your hands on?
Excited to get my hands on them. actually willing to go back into the older technology, back into the older programming languages that people don't use as much. C and C++, or not C++, but really C is sort of on its way out. It's like an older programming language designed for people who are really into computers and how computers work. And that's, I have a passion for computers also, and a passion for game design. So I try to combine the two. And, indie development now, and you see people using tools like Unity and GameMaker that are very visual and very designed for people who aren't programmers to make games. And that's sort of where the industry is headed. You see a lot of people using tools that take programming out of the equation sort of and let these people make games. And I see a certain limitation to that, but it also enables people who couldn't make games before to make games now.
I'll stick with RPG Maker.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, that's a classic right there.
Forge and Halo.
I mean, hey, someone somewhere made To the Moon with nothing but RPG Maker.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So speaking of that design process, you wrote an excellent blog a couple months back, I think, about your one specific way of programming, and you've already elaborated on that a bit, but I'm interested to delve a little farther into it.
Yeah, it's been forever since I wrote that blog post, so I think my whole point of that blog post, because I remember being very confused when I wrote that. It was sort of a stream of consciousness sort of writing.
Just the typewriter mind you want to be in when you're writing.
Exactly.
Completely confused.
Completely confused. I was really confused.
Okay, nobody knows what they're doing.
Exactly, yeah. It sort of came down to being able to try to just convey what was on my mind at the time. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of my blog is just, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. writings after a long night of programming. Like, here are my thoughts right now. Here they are.
Word of mouth, just spilling it out
there.
Yeah,
exactly. Like, most of it's just like, there's no one else to talk to about this because, there's no other indie developers that aren't online, like here on campus. So it's really hard to bounce ideas off of people, and my blog is like the outlet for that.
Yeah, now that you mention that, I've never looked into it at all, but are there perhaps like indie networks of sorts, like anything existing right now?
It's a small cottage industry,
like a Reddit or something.
Yeah, Reddit has a large indie developer community. Game dev, r/game dev. Mm-hmm. I can't think of any others. It'd take me a while to think of them, but as far as networks go, there's the IGDA, I think, which is the independent game something, and Indianapolis and Chicago, I think, are the two local meeting places for that. And even that is still relatively small. It's hard. It's really hard to find indie developers that aren't, strictly indie, working by themselves in their own studios in their own homes. It's hard to find them together in a central area that isn't like GDC or any other like PAX or some kind of con somewhere.
Have you actually found, even though it's rare, have you actually found another developer like within the rough tri-state area?
Yeah, you're more likely to find people who are just dabbling in game development, but there's one person, his name's Wes. He was actually a member of the game developer group here on campus that was around 1 or 2 years ago. It's kind of around now, but it's sort of dying out. But he's actually self-funded now on game development. Him and his brother by themselves are making racing games and getting them licensed by actual companies and being successful from there. But I think he's the only one I know besides Paul Geswicki, who's a professor here on campus, who's very well known for his work in games.
Yeah. So you talk about them getting published and everything. Going back to Reactor 3, what are your plans of distribution, really just getting it out there? Well,
I sort of had this idea when I started this game that I wouldn't ever advertise it, and I wouldn't ever put it out there to people that I knew would see it and view it as an advertisement. I wanted people to see it and think, okay, that's something I'm interested in. So I target extremely small communities of 15 to 20 people online usually, and put it out on those sites, like the really, really small niche subreddits on Reddit. And from there I've had amazing response. Like probably 50% of the people I show it to on there are more than likely to follow me on Twitter, follow me on Facebook or whatever. Like it's really receptive.
That's actually, that's a pretty interesting marketing strategy. Like I feel like when you throw that piece of material into such a small 15, 20 person group, you're almost daring them to sort of share in that enjoyment. And it's a small enough group that they will be able to converse about it and sharing the experience even more than they would if you just tossed it out to every major social feed.
Yeah, and the idea there was I knew that the people would understand it without me having to explain every single process, like explain what a roguelike is, explain what all the, whatever X feature is. I would just be able to put it out there and people would understand.
So what do you think about the larger indie industry sort of starting to really grow steam now? We have titles like Gone Home and Octodad or Deadliest Catch coming out on like major Sony consoles and everything. Is that something that you're aiming for down the road, or are you more content with the very niche market?
The niche market idea was more so I could actually get an audience easier that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I were to make another game that was more widely acceptable, to a larger group of people, it's way harder to make something that stands out. You really have to do something that's to the point and something that attracts a group of people, not something that attracts a large group of people. So I do at some point plan to get into independent development in all areas, like console, PC, mobile, anything I get my hands on, I will make games for if I have to.
Well, okay, Lucas, do you have any more questions?
Well, first off, how long have you been working on Reactor 3?
Reactor 3 has been in development for over a year, just about a year and 3 months, I think.
Quite a long time. So like in terms of how it looks now, what improvements do you have in mind right now that you plan on adding to it and for the final version?
Is there a release date?
Like? Is there a release
a street date? Yeah, where you walk away from it.
Yeah,
I'm just interested more in the
no game
process.
is ever finished.
No game is ever finised. Exactly, and
it can always get a little bit more polished. But I mean, like, what do you plan on adding to it? You got to have some idea.
Like I was saying earlier, there's a real problem with indie developers where they just want to add everything, including the kitchen sink. And with me, I finally realized just a couple months ago that is not possible. That if I ever want to graduate with a game actually out, for people to play, I have to lock down and do stuff now. So my plans now are just to write content, write missions, write dialogue, maybe try to put some kind of tile set with the game so people aren't staring at ASCII graphics the whole time. But there really is no release date. That's sort of the problem with asking the indie developer when his release date is. I'm sure you're all familiar with the game Fez that took about 5 years to get out the door.
Notorious.
And now Fez 2 is just vaporware.
Vaporware, yeah, exactly.
So I'm trying to think of with the process of sort of being in continuous development. What are your thoughts on some of the bigger titles that what do you see as the true definition of an indie game? Because obviously like Gone Home was on a team of like maybe 8 to 12 individuals. What really captures the sense of an indie game to you? We're getting into more artistic territory.
Exactly.
Here.
Yeah. The problem is that at a certain point you have to draw the line, and
I think the lines are getting blurred as the technology gets more and more accessible. I mean, eventually we'll get to the point where me with no game development,
RPG
knowledge
Maker,
at all, but a more sophisticated RPG with more additions and qualities, and basically just a lot of shortcuts.
Yeah, Unity is the exact definition of that. Yeah.
A lot more spiky hair. Yeah, I want to make my JRPGs. So I am pretty thrilled. Let's talk more about Reactor 3 because it's certainly one of the more interesting products I've seen in terms of indie. I don't know that much about roguelike. Can you get into a sense of what traditional roguelikes are versus yours? Because you touched on it briefly, but I want to again hear what's truly setting you apart. Sell your game to me. Go.
Okay, my game, like I said, is randomly generated, which a lot of games, a lot of roguelikes rather, are randomly generated, but a lot of them very much focus on the player and make the player feel like he's the hero in the world. Reactor 3 intends to put the player in a position where they do not at all feel like they are the center of attention, that they're actually just this moving entity across this world that is rapidly changing around them. The story isn't actually fully developed yet, but as you move throughout this world, the story is shaped around you based on your actions. So each time you play the game, the story is being woven for you based on your actions.
How are you making those diverging paths in the game? Because that's got to be incredibly difficult
It's
to
insanely
program
difficult.
multiple scenarios based on random effects.
Exactly. A big struggle with that is trying to make everything as open as possible. A lot of the decision-making process for how the story is woven is very much on the fly. It's very in the moment. There's no real. A lot of it's just random. I'll be honest. Like a lot of it just happens because something has to happen. And when you're making a game, the player a lot of the time isn't really questioning why something is happening. If someone just pops out of nowhere, most of the time you're not going to ask why that happened. Your mind is going to fill in the blank sort of come up with a reason why that thing happened. And during playtesting, I really noticed that people just not questioning things and just letting them happen and taking them as this huge like process behind the scenes to make this stuff happen when it's actually just zeros and ones just flying at you on the screen.
Yeah. I don't care why this bag of popcorn is giving me 20 health. I just accept it.
Just happens.
So, okay, I am pretty good there. Let's just chat real quick. What are your favorite indie games coming out? What's speaking to you? Whether or not it's more traditional, like super indie dev like a roguelike, or if it's a much more popularized commercial release like Gone Home, Fez, or something like that, where they're making movies and merchandise for.
Exactly.
What's speaking to you?
DayZ.
Okay.
One of the most impressive games I have ever set my eyes on ever. Like it is hugely complex, based on a military simulation. It's a zombie survival game that really
based off of Arma.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, based off this extremely realistic rule set where it's an FPS largely, but you're essentially placed into this huge open world with all these other players, like maybe up to 25 or 50 maybe at a time on this large multiplayer map, and you're collecting loot and you're interacting with other people and you're forming your own groups and you're sort of.
And there are zombies everywhere.
Yeah, and there are zombies somewhere.
Did you see the Gentleman Bandit video?
Yes, I've seen that, yeah.
Can I come with you? No, I wouldn't feel very good about that. Did you see that, Lucas?
No, I didn't. Fill me in.
It's brilliant. A much more professional DayZ player comes up behind a guy, a brand new player, and is like, I've got you. I'm sticking you up. And the guy's like, I'm sorry, I'm new. I don't know what to do. And he's like, press Control, Alt, open inventory, put down your can opener, steals it. He's like, okay, man, see you later. And the guys, they like being a total gentleman about robbing this guy blind. And the last line is just brilliant. Can I come with you? No, I wouldn't feel good about that, but I'm new. So, yeah. All right, guys, that has been a great interview with Luke Martin. Luke, tell them where they can find you and your work.
Twitter.com/JetstarForever or Tumblr.com/FlagsDev. Those are my main two social media outlets usually for my working games. That's about it though.
All right, well, we're looking forward to Reactor 3, and thank you so much for coming on the show, Luke.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
All right, and this has been Button Mash on WCRD 91.3 FM. Check us out on Twitter. Check us out on Facebook. That's Button Mash BSU. Thanks, guys. Have a good weekend.